Well, since I've just dropped all of my books on the floor, I'm just gonna pick them up as they're at my feet. If you haven't caught on already, of course this video is a book haul. I have around 20 books to show you, which is definitely more than I would usually haul, and I've definitely been acquiring more books recently than is my norm, but honestly just going to the bookshop at the moment, either by myself or a lot of the times with my friend Jill, is just the most relaxing, pleasant thing I can think to do, and it's a place that I'm finding a lot of solace, and treating myself to a few extra books doesn't seem like the end of the world. I've also been reading way more than usual recently, so I'm sure I'll get to all of these very soon. I've already read a few in fact, but without further ado, let's get into the books, shall we? Let's start with my 3 most recent acquisitions from my latest trip to Blackwell's with Jill, and these were all in 3 for 2, so lucky for me, one of these was free. And the first one is one that I intentionally went to the bookshop to pick up, and that is The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. I have actually seen the film version of this book many years ago now and did enjoy the film, and I've always meant to pick up the book, and I feel that now it's been long enough that the plot's a little bit fuzzy in the back of my head that I'll definitely get a lot out of the book still, as I'm sure it's far superior, as books usually are. But one of the things that really pushed me to finally pick up was that it was referenced in another book I was reading that I will in fact show you in this haul, and it just sparked it in my mind that I need to finally read that book. This story follows the Lisbon Sisters, a group of girls that the neighbourhood are pretty much obsessed with. I guess they have this elusive nature that everyone wants to know them, and their story is narrated by the young men and boys that observe them and are so intrigued by them, and that's how we find out about their story until the first one commits suicide. I'm really fascinated to see how this book is written, having seen the film and never having read any Jeffrey Eugenides before, so hopefully this one's as good as everybody says it is. I then have 2 books I hadn't heard of, but the next one's the reason I ended up getting 3 for 2, because it sounded so interesting that I had to have it, and it meant I had 2, so I had to find a 3rd one, and that is The Room by the Lake by Emma Dibdin. This is obviously a new release, as it's in a hardback, and it sounds like a thriller, and I have been loving thrillers at the moment. It's about a young woman escaping her past and all the problems she's had to deal with, aren't we all? And she meets an enigmatic young man who takes her to meet his family, who are more like a strange cult that he's not really related to, and then I think obviously some dark stuff starts to happen. Not everything is as it seems. They seem like sort of nature-loving exercisers that, you know, eat well, blah blah blah. Obviously it's darker than that. I mean, you can tell from the cover it's a thriller, can you? And lastly, my 3 for 2, I picked up a book never heard of, was a completely random pickup. I was finding it so hard to find a 3rd book that was in the deal that I wanted, and I ended up settling for this one. I picked up off the shelf, read the back, thought, yep, sure, I'll read that. And it's The Darkness Within by Alana Night. This is the first in the Inspector Farrow and Rose McQuinn mystery series, although from what I can tell there's a separate Farrow mystery series and a separate Rose McQuinn mystery series, and they are father and daughter, and this is bringing the 2 kind of detectives together in a new series, I believe. But I just thought this sounded so fascinating, as it's a detective novel set in 1906 on the Orkney Islands, and that's all I needed to know really. It's historical mystery set in super rural Scotland and, you know, on an island. What more could you possibly want? I then have 2 books I picked up at the Edinburgh Book Festival with, of course, my partner in crime, Jill. Jill does have a YouTube channel, which I'll link down below if you haven't checked out already. But the first one I picked up at the book festival was one I already had my eye on, and it has been longlisted for the Man Booker Prize. It is, of course, The History of Wolves by Emily Friedland, and like I said, it's been longlisted for the Man Booker. There's a few books on the long list this year that I am interested in, although I own none of them, so I will get to them eventually, no rush, and this is the one that I wanted the most. I feel like I'm going to do it an injustice by trying to re-summarise the summary for you, so I'm just going to read the inside. It says, 14-year-old Linda lives with her parents in an ex-commune beside a lake in the beautiful austere backwoods of northern Minnesota. The other girls at school called Linda Freak or Commie. Her parents mostly leave her to her own devices while the other inhabitants have grown up and moved on. So when a young family, mother, father and their little boy Paul, move into the cabin across the lake, Linda insinuates her way into their orbit. She begins to babysit Paul and feels welcome, that she finally has a place to belong. Yet something isn't right. Drawn into the secrets she doesn't understand, Linda must make a choice, but how can a girl with no real knowledge of the world understand what the consequences will be? And this sounds like one of my favourite genres, which is kind of like a literary mystery. Dark literary mystery. I'm hoping that's what this is. And then it's a book that I discovered at the book festival. I didn't know it existed, but saw it on the shelves in the book sale tents, which is always something I like to do when the book festival's here, you know, discover at least one book I didn't know about. And this one is Protest, Stories of Resistance by a variety of authors. This is an anthology of short stories by different authors, writing stories about historical protests and moments of uprising, and then each one is followed by a non-fiction sort of description of that real event by a historian or even a person that was there. So, you know, you're actually learning something about history, old and new, whilst you're reading this, as well as getting some short stories to go along with it. And this one goes all the way back to the 1300s with the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. It goes to the 1600s, the 1800s, and then there's quite a few from the 1900s. And then even the very, very beginning of the 21st century with the anti-Iraq war demo in 2003, which I was actually on. I was only about 11, but it was quite nice that I was there for one of those, because all the other ones happened before I was born. My mum has already stolen this off me and read a few of them and really enjoyed them, so I'm looking forward to getting my toes into this. But whilst we're on the topic of Jill, she actually very kindly bought me a book, so I will share that with you, and it is After the Fire by Will Hill. Good name. This is a young adult book set in a commune type cult. I do seem to be going for those kind of books at the moment, don't I? And I've already started dipping my toes into this one, and it seems to be told between before and after, so whilst she's still in this sort of religious cult type environment where they don't get to interact with the outside world, and after a fire has happened and she's now, I guess, living outside of the cult and recalling her experience. So the next book I picked up secondhand and have already read, and that is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan Mcguire, and I have heard such mixed things about this book on BookTube, but the premise was so interesting to me that it didn't really matter that people had mixed feelings about it, because I needed to read that story. The premise is that it follows a group of teenagers who have all been sent to a boarding school, which is specifically for teenagers or children that have gone to other worlds and come back. So sort of like Alice having gone to Wonderland, or the kids in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe having gone to Narnia and then having to come back and reacclimatise to the real world. Their parents obviously don't think they're telling the truth, they think it's all sort of delusions, so they send them to this boarding school, but this boarding school knows that what happened to them was actually real. And that premise is blooming fantastic. I love that premise. I think it's so imaginative, and I think the story's quite imaginative. I don't think the book's that great though. I think it's very insubstantial, there's very little character development, you find out very little about the fairy realms that they went to, just little details here and there. I mean, it's not long at all. It's only like 160 something pages, and I think it needed to be longer. I think it was really rushed, and there was a bit of a murder mystery in there, and that starts like a third of the way through the book and then is over by the end. It was all too quick. I was then sent a proof copy by the publishers of one of my most anticipated releases of this year, and that is The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell. This is a short story collection by Jen Campbell, who is a booktuber, and I will link her down below, and I am so excited to have a copy of this. I have read a few of the stories in this already, and they are just spectacular. They are so magical and surreal and otherworldly, but also very worldly current themes. And they're just beautiful. You feel like you're falling into another world, and each story is very unique, which doesn't always happen with short story collections. I feel like each of the stories in this collection is very unique. I then have 3 books that my mum very kindly bought me in the supermarket when we were buying food, as they were quite cheap there, and if you watch my last book haul, you'll know until last book haul. I'd never bought a book in the supermarket in my life, and now it seems like I'm a supermarket book junkie. That's probably just because I'm really into thrillers at the moment, and they always seem to have a lot of thrillers. So I've got 3 here, one of which I've read and 2 of which I haven't. So I'll show you the one I've read first, and that is Roanoke Girls by Amy Engel. And this story follows our protagonist, Lane Roanoke, who was sent to live with her grandparents and her cousin after her mum committed suicide. And the book's told in 2 time periods again. So that summer she lived with her grandparents and her cousin, and then now in the future where she's coming back to her grandparents' house for the first time since leaving it only a few months after she went there in the first place, because her cousin has gone missing. It's maybe like 10 years later or something like that. It's quite a while later. Her cousin is missing and her grandfather has phoned her to ask her to come and help find her cousin, which is also dredging up all the stuff that happened the summer before. And you're gradually piecing things together, although you discover one of the kind of most unsettling things about the story quite early on. There's still enough mystery to keep going, and you don't know what happened to Allegra, the cousin, for most of the story. So I found this one very compelling. I could not put it down, but also quite gross and unsettling. I then have a book I picked up because I saw Emma from Drinking by My Shelf talk about it, actually in her guest host episode for Book Break, which was all about thrillers and getting into the thriller genre, and this one I just thought I had to have. And then luckily for me I saw it in the supermarket at a pretty reasonable price, and that is I See You by Claire McIntosh. This is a thriller about women being stalked on their way to work because their routine is a routine, so it's easy to follow and they get the same tubes every day, and whilst they're travelling on the London Underground somebody is watching them. I don't know why I'm so drawn to this book since I travel on the London Underground. You'd think I'd want to stay so far away from a story like this, but no, it's made me more intrigued. So hopefully this is as good as Emma says it is. And then lastly, for supermarket thriller type books, I have Good Me, Bad Me by Ali Land. This one sounds a bit more unique in that it is about a young woman, a teenager I guess she is, whose mother has been sent to prison because she is a serial killer who killed children, and the main character actually like dubbed her into the police, told the police that her mother was a serial killer, and she's now been given another identity and been placed with like a foster family to live with because she has no other family. And it's about her dealing with her mum's trial and adjusting to life and wondering if, you know, she has taken after her mother. So super interesting premise, and I have read the first chapter or 2 of this one, and I actually really enjoyed the writing, so I'm going to get to this one soon. I then have another book that was sent to me by the publisher. This one I was not expecting in the post, but it's so beautiful, I'm so pleased to have it, and that is this edition of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This is published by Oxford, and it's a new series of classics that they've brought out in these gorgeous hardbacks that you can get not just Jane Austen's work, but authors like Fyodor Dostoevsky and, you know, classics, lots of classics, and they're all in a different colour with just the text, the title and the author on the front, and then a little image above that. And I just think these are so simple and gorgeous. They would just make the most beautiful gift, and I'm so pleased to have this on my bookshelf. Then a book, big hardback book, that I got for £1. I got this in a charity shop, and it is The City of Dreaming Books by Walter Moores. I have a couple of other books by Walter Moores, including The 13.5 Lives of Captain Bluebeard, which I adore. These are what I always think of as children's books for adults. They are wacky, comical, fantasy, otherworld books with magical, wacky creatures, but with all of the substantial literary merit to get your teeth into as an adult. They were originally written in German, of course this is an English translation, and I'm just super pleased to have another one of his books on my shelves, especially for £1. Come on, that's amazing for a big hardback book. All of these books are set in Zamonia, which is Walter Moore's magical world that he's created, and pretty much all I know about this one is it's set in a massive second-hand bookshop. Perfection. I then have 4 books, all with a slightly witchy theme, as I'm currently on a witchy bender. My thriller bender has transpired into a witchy bender, which I'm now on. And one of these I've already read, and it's The Graces by Laura Eve. This is the first in a series, which I didn't actually know. I thought it was a standalone, and the sequel's not out till January, which is very annoying because I did enjoy this, and the ending definitely left me hankering for more. This is definitely one for fans of films like The Craft, or in fact it reminded me a little bit of The Virgin Suicides, and this is the book that mentioned The Virgin Suicides after about 100 pages, which I thought, I knew it was reminding me of that book. I also feel like there's a little bit of secret history chucked in there too, a combination of a lot of good things. It is a young adult book which follows our protagonist River, who moves to a new school where everyone is obsessed with 3 students, the Graces, who are siblings, and everyone wants to be friends with, wants to date, but they also all think that they're witches, and they sort of keep themselves a little bit more removed from the rest of the students, never having extremely close friends, until River comes along and finds her way into their group. But since I'm on a bit of a witchy kick, I have picked up 2 more books about witches. The first one is The Circle, which is the first in the Engelsford trilogy, and this is by Sarah B. Elfgren and Mats Strandenberg. This is about a group of 6 teenage girls at school, I believe, who are all granted a magical ability and told by a strange otherworldly being that they have to fight in some ancient war. Sounds intense, very magical, and I don't know much more than that, but I always see this on lists of kind of witch books that you should read, so since it seems to have such a grand following and fan base, I thought it was worth giving a shot. The next one I'd never heard of and didn't know anything about, and it's a young adult book called The Witch's Kiss by Catherine and Elizabeth Corr. I'm reading this one at the moment and I'm not as in love with it as I have been with my other witchy books I've been reading, but I'm willing to give it a chance and get to the end before I pass judgment. It follows, again, a young girl who is in a long line of female witches, although her mother doesn't want her practicing witchcraft, so she hasn't had as much contact with her grandmother as she should have, who would have taught her about her craft, so she's pretty inexperienced, and something has started to happen in her life which means she really needs to know how to use her magic. I'm about 70 pages into this one and it's 400 odd pages, but I think I'll fly through it because it's a really easy read. And then the last book was actually given to me by a friend, Linda, who'd already finished reading it and was just passing it on, and just so happens to have a bit of a witchy theme. This one, however, I don't think is really about witches. It is Harvest by Jim Crace. I think this is something a little bit more similar to The Crucible by Arthur Miller. It's set on a barley farm where one man has inherited the land from his deceased wife, I believe, and then a relative of his wife comes along saying actually he should have inherited the land, and there are accusations of witchcraft that start to be thrown around, and a bit of a battle there going on between the 2 people that want to control the land, I think, from Linda's description, but she said this was really, really good and I trust her opinion. And last but certainly not least is a comic book, and that is the 2nd volume of Bitch Planet by Kelly Sue DeConnick. This is a dystopian comic book series which I have read the first in the series of and absolutely adored. And the main premise of this story is that there is a separate prison planet, colloquially called Bitch Planet, where women who have not behaved as women should do are sent. And this could be anything that is in any way seen to subvert the submissive feminine role in this society. And it's such a good comic book series. I love the premise. And the first one felt like me to be a mixture between something like The Handmaid's Tale and The Longest Yard. It was great. I loved it, and I am really excited to have the 2nd volume to finally get around to reading. I will say it's a very violent series, but I think it's a very clever comic book series and well worth giving a shot. But that's everything I had to show you in this book haul. I hope you have enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the books I've mentioned in this video. I hope you enjoyed this book haul. Happy reading, and I'll see you again next time. Bye guys.